Welcome to Pop.0 with Brian Chaffin and John Keith.
Today is Thursday, March 15th, payday for a lot of people, 2018. And this is a video podcast for the Mac Observer. I'm Brian Chaffin, editor-in-chief for TMO.
No, Brian, you are still a liar because this is not a video podcast, nor will it be. And I'm John Keith. How you doing?
I'm doing well. Just wanted to make sure to start off by pushing your buttons. Push, 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 push.
The line starts forming there. All right. Today we have 3 topics, and of course we're lying. On today's amazing show, causes of Mac decay. 2, Apple Store is the new DMV. Number 3, Jony hates jazz Forstall. And show pick. So why don't we start with our first topic, causes of Mac decay. And,
causes of Mac decay.
Well, maybe we won't get the causes, but let's just talk about Mac decay. It was I'll read a little bit of a email that we got. I don't want to say the name because I'm not sure if he wants his name. We'll just call him G. Oh, G. Yes. Sent us an email that said, Brian and John, wanted to talk about something on Pop.0, which was x86 Windows improvements, Cylinder Mac Pro. How much did each of these contribute to the death of the Mac, especially in the Pro market? And he has a lot of very good thoughts here. I'll read a couple of some context. Did Apple's choice of Intel CPU doom the Mac long term? How much did Windows improvements play into this? Was the Cylinder Mac Pro the last nail in the Pro coffin? And I think I'll let you speak for yourself. I disagree with his premise, which is that the Mac is dead. But I agree with a lot of his analysis and thoughts on the topic, and I thought it'd be an interesting topic. I'll say I don't think the Mac is dead, but it may be experiencing a downturn. And simultaneously, I've been a part of a Twitter chat with a former Apple employee that worked on the original iPhone team, Bob Burrow, and I advanced this topic, which is, I think at a time when Windows is getting better all the time, like the Surface Book is better, Windows 10 is better, and they're kind of improving things, and there's less sins and crimes against nature in Windows every month than the month before. Whereas on the Mac, it seems there are more security breaches and UI atrocities and fuck-ups on the software side month after month. And the trajectory isn't good, right?
Okay, but hold on, that's only though. That's the security thing in particular is a recent development versus something that's been building over time. We had this big rash of security problems, and it's problematic, and I'm tense about it. But I don't want to characterize that as some kind of counter to the idea that Windows is steadily getting better and the Mac is steadily getting worse. We just happen to have run through a bad patch, hopefully.
Well, on the security side, I'll agree with that. Although some may say that, ever since that Apple guy that left, that we can never remember his name, that was security-wise, that it's been going down. But it's more along this lines of decay, which is that the UI, by many people's measurements, has been decaying for quite a while. Some point to the flattening that happened in iOS 7 and Jony taking over as part of that decay in not following user guidelines and whatnot, or not having good user guidelines. And it's also, by the way, with the WWDC kind of invite, having this 3D glass extruded UI widgets has a lot of criticism amongst some UI critics out there, saying Apple said that we shouldn't have this crap, and now they're going to appropriate this and claim that it was always a good idea.
No, I gotta poop on that right now, though.
Go for it, man.
I gotta poop on that in particular right now. Apple changes. So Apple said Apple said that skeuomorphism was great, and then Apple said that skeuomorphism was passe. If Apple is now going to say that no, 3D is the bee's knees, it's just the way Apple changes things. That's the way they've always done things. It's no more different, except for it's less audacious than Steve Jobs saying it's about the music stupid, right? And that we're never going to support video on iPods because it's about the music stupid. And then 6 or 9 months later, rolling out the video iPod, and so like I completely disagree with that aspect of criticism about this, that because Apple went flat, it can therefore never go 3D. That's ridiculous, especially when the people that are complaining about that, John, are like pissed that Apple went flat, and now they're pissed that Apple is going to do something that's not flat.
Right. So oddly, we're going to agree on this, and this goes back to a theme that I've mentioned several times, which is the falsehood that hypocrisy is always bad. Right?
Have you said that before? Because you have said that before.
Sure. I always bring up the example of people are full of shit when they talk about hypocrisy, because like it's a bad thing, because every parent on earth, the way they rear their kids is through hypocrisy. I was stupid when I did this, therefore you shouldn't do it. It's pretty much the fucking cornerstone of rearing kids, right? Is that hypocrisy? I did it, you shouldn't. Right. So I brought that up a million times, and so it's this falsehood that hypocrisy is always bad. It certainly, should make your eyebrows go up when someone's being hypocritical, but sometimes it's just a good thing. Meaning when I shit on this idea before and then I adopt that idea bad, you're kind of missing the bigger picture by focusing on the hypocrisy. Sure, it was hypocritical to do so, but isn't being savvy enough eventually to adopt the better idea, speak better of the person or thing that's not the better idea?
This has been Apple's modus operandi, at least under Steve Jobs in particular, where this is stupid, this is stupid, this is stupid, this is stupid. Aha! Now we're doing this thing, but we've solved the stupid part. We've made it better. We've figured out what they were doing wrong, and this is what Apple has done. And they changed. They went from lickable to something that was not lickable to eventually flat. And if the WWDC homepage is indicative of 3D widgets and 3D controls and buttons again, they're going to do something new. I don't care about the hypocrisy. That just makes me tense as can be.
The hypocrisy, it's one of those things that sophists do, and which is one of the reasons that everyone wanted to kill all the sophists in ancient Greece, which is it derails the debate on the substance to deal with minutia as if it's a character issue. It really goes into the bigger bucket of hyperbole, which is not to say you don't call people out for hypocrisy when you question their motives or what a more real agenda is, but it's broken down to this cliche that it's an aha moment, and it ignores the bigger question of, is this a good thing or a bad thing, which is really what is the bigger topic and probably should be the more important topic. So, and I agree with you, Apple's been guilty of backtracking a bajillion times, so who cares?
But like Jobs was the master of that. Sure. I saw one tweet, John, that was Apple has no right to render glass. I think that's a quote. Yeah. Apple has no right to render glass, except for the fact that it does, and go fuck yourself. I mean, like, seriously, Apple has no right to render glass? Or what the fuck is that? What does that even fucking mean? Are you fucking... I don't even get that. Now,
okay.
What's that?
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, there was a thread buried in there about how Apple's desire to kill skeuomorphism and to go flat was all about burning down down everything that Scott Forstall built.
And this was one of the most, by the way, Bob Burrow is a fucking hero. And I don't necessarily agree with everything Bob Burrow is. And again, he's this ex-Apple engineer that used to, he was part of the original 2000, not the original, but he was part of the iPhone team in 2007 through 2014. But he's doing something I haven't not seen any other Apple employee do, which is have the balls to talk shit about Apple, and not undeserving shit, by the way. I'm saying that in not a pejorative way, in the kind of like, let's really open up the kimono and be transparent about what's good and not so good about Apple and be objective about it.
Yeah, I was going to ask you. You've obviously you've spoken with him. I haven't, but you've also seemingly exposed yourself to a lot more of what he has to say. Does he also have good things to say?
I think so, but I think he had very positive things to say about his experience on the interview that I mentioned. It's the podcast is called Menu Bar. It's episode 2, best Apple employee interview I've heard maybe in 10 years, easy. And he had very positive things to say about his experience at Apple and whatnot. But he also, the place isn't perfect, and he has his criticism. And I think he has a valid point to say. So, and this is what I've been saying for a long time. So much of the press walks goose step and is PC or worse with regard to Apple's missteps, that he feels like he needs to be a voice. And he says so. And during the podcast, he said this. It's not out of meanness or hatred. He's like, or maybe it was the podcasters that did this, but I totally agree with this sentiment. Why do I care? I don't give a fuck if Microsoft falls off the face of the earth or Google or anything else, outside of my own convenience of Googling or something like that. But I just don't care about the company. There's something about Apple that has goodness in it. And there's no other company that has that. There's only one company I would allow a wiretap in from, and that is Apple. Yep. And
I agree with all
that. That may change. That may change. I may disagree with that at some point.
No, it will change. It has to change someday. At some point, there will be enough of a personnel change within Apple that things will change about how Apple does business. It's only a matter of time.
Maybe it could get better. It could get worse. Who knows? But
it will do both, probably.
The reason and the general vibe that came out of that podcast was we want to do these things not because we're shitting on Apple to shit on Apple. It's that we want them to be better. They're the only company we care about. And that's something very special. And that's when I shit on Apple, it comes from that place for me. For everything else, it's very utilitarian for me. Sometimes the company does good, sometimes the company does bad. So I don't think he's like got some kind of axe to grind. So I view it as very brave because let's not understate how powerful Apple is. And by being a former employee, God knows what's in his separation agreement when he left. There's fear of if he's still a professional, he's working in the tech place, there could be repercussions to talking out about Apple. And it's kind of brave for him to make a lot of the statements. Anyway, with that.
Well, I would also say, John, it's also brave from the standpoint of burning bridges in Silicon Valley, no matter who you work for, is generally speaking bad for your career.
Yeah.
So, and maybe he just doesn't need to worry about that anymore.
I hope that's the case. And he's at his own kind of gig where he's doing his next great big thing, and I hope it's a wonderful success. But everyone shit on Scott Forstall because he's this big troublemaker, and it was so much drama and acrimony caused by his existence at Apple. And so just to calm the troops, they had to get rid of him. And he posed a really interesting question. And it's like, do you ever think that Scott, and I'm quoting here from his tweet, did you ever consider that Scott Forstall might not have gotten along with Jony because Jony was trying to destroy him? Like, it's a lot of he said, she said going on there. Clearly the victors write the history. So you never know what was going on there. And I gotta say, I'm not pleased with the direction of the software user interface that has resulted and emanated from Cupertino since that transition. Now, whether or not Scott Forstall was responsible for better decisions beforehand, who the heck knows? But the point is that Jony's not infallible, and not getting along. It's funny. Steve Jobs didn't get along with a lot of people at Apple. He'd argue the shit out of them. And when he didn't like what they had to say long enough, he'd fire their asses. So, and he supposedly developed, a level of acrimony is good. And maybe the team was following basically his example, which is we could only fight so long. And if someone's not on the same page, they got to go. And that may be the truth there. But it's an interesting point to look at it the other way, is like, we don't know what went on, but I know what happened afterwards. And what happened afterwards, in my opinion, is that the UI has devolved to shit. They don't pay attention to the Mac at all, and not great things.
Yeah, we don't know, John. We certainly don't know. It is absolutely, from those of us who care about Apple, those of us who write about Apple, talk about Apple, and then of course just for fans and people that care about the company, kind of playing on the same theme that you expressed a few minutes ago. It's an interesting academic question, to be sure. If the issue was that Jony Ive was trying to destroy him, that doesn't fit with the information that has leaked. And Scott Forstall himself has never questioned it, and I've never heard any evidence put forward that was the case. The evidence that I've seen put forward and heard talked about, John, is that actually I'm going to devolve into my own characterization of this. My gut feeling was always that Scott Forstall loved Steve Jobs, probably saw himself as the keeper of the Steve Jobs flame, and believed in Steve Jobs' assholeness without having the nuance of understanding how to lift people up too.
Maybe.
And that was the source of the friction, is that he was an asshole to people, to his fellow executives, and not to mention, of course, that failure to do what Tim Cook asked, which was to sign that letter of apology for Maps.
Yeah, so he may have been a prima donna, but a little bit. I'll have 2 points on that. One is he really hasn't said anything, which makes it interesting as a prima donna. Now, I'm sure he has a non-disclosure agreement, but that's had to have lapsed by now. And two, but he may have a non-disparagement agreement as part of a separation, which may continue on.
I've actually had the impression that he probably is on good terms with Tim somehow.
Yeah,
I don't know that, but that's the impression I had. And when you listen to, if you did you watch his interview, his presentation?
Yep.
Right. I mean, he was such a great speaker, and he was so kind, and he was just such a good presenter. It's definitely kind of hard to balance the rumors with that public persona he put forth and during that
also
event.
The silence.
I'm talking about the Computer History Museum.
Yeah, but it's also his silence. Like, if you're a dick, you'd be a dick in a lot of other places. So that's part of it. The other thing is, I'll remind you that when Jobs got kicked out, he didn't talk about it forever. And of course, we only heard Apple's side, which was he's this menace, and we didn't get the truth of the details what went on in that boardroom till many years later. But
Steve did basically say that Apple was screwed. He said that pretty early.
Well, he was entitled to say that, but he couldn't say what went on in the boardroom and what and why and when, basically because of legal restraints on part of the terms of the separation. And so you only heard one side, because the other side was muffled by contractual agreement.
Right.
And
that's true.
Positive it was the same here. So we got one side, a corporate side, and we know that the corporate explanation of what Apple said about Jobs's leaving was complete lies, horse shit. That's exactly what turned out here. So, it's not stretching credulity to say that maybe there's a little bit of that going on here too.
Yeah, it's absolutely possible. And certainly Scott Forstall's a freaking genius.
He did a lot
for the record.
By the way, and so was I can't believe I learned about this like basically a year late, but Keith Ulf's whatchamacallit, died. He was one of the Next team for a while back, and he and Avi Tevanian did a lot of good stuff, and I wouldn't put Scott quite up on the same level as those two guys, but he he did a lot. He was a Nexter, and he did a lot to move things forward. So an interesting cat. Anyway, we've devolved a little bit from the point, which is, so there's all this acrimony.
Are you just meeting us?
Yeah. And a lot of it is basically criticism of this decay. The UI has decayed. The quality of the experience in the software has gone down. The care to the Mac has gone down. And more specifically to OG's comments, which is, he's saying the Mac is dead. Did the cylinder Mac, did the choice of processor hurt that? I think he makes a good point, because if Apple didn't change processors to x86, would all of those professionals been even more locked on the Mac than they currently are? I don't think, well, that's an interesting question, and I'm sure there's some proportion of pros that may have stuck it out an extra year or so because of that. The software is just too similar on both platforms that it doesn't matter. Like, if you're a Photoshop dude, Photoshop on Windows, the fact that it's x86, you don't give a damn, right? Because you're just going to use it there in its own native and much better, much faster form. I think what really happened that caused professionals to leave, and I think I'm literally the only one to have reported on this, which was there are forums where these pros lay out, and if you watch them over the years, it's like the scene from Dr. Seuss, when from the Dr. Seuss thing. What was that? The trees that were being chopped down. I forget the Lorax, right?
Yep.
Or all the animals are sad because it's all so polluted and turned to shit, that the environment has just turned to shit, that they all sadly one by one are leaving. And that's the way these pro users were leaving. They weren't leaving happy. They were leaving because they were abandoned, and the environment turned to shit, and Apple didn't care. And it was only after huge outcries started to come out about, holy shit, the Mac Pro hasn't been updated in how long? It was getting ridiculous, even over the trash can, that people realized they're abandoned. And these guys have left little by little until it became swarms of them leaving. And whether or not Apple's, a day late and a dollar short at this point is I guess debatable, but it may be that way. And it's just it's kind of like they just didn't give a shit is the only explanation I can have on it. And I think part of that is this group that makes decisions at Apple is too much. They've detached themselves from the larger part of Apple, the engineers and the feedback, like the details about the user interface, not even just the alignment and topography being wrong in the flattened version of System 7. Bob Burrow mentioned he gave feedback on this. He's like, this is fucked up. And normally when Steve Jobs was there and he'd get that feedback, Steve would make shit happen around it. And now the way he reported it is, after that at Apple was like, shut the fuck up, just do what you're told. You're not, just keep doing what you're told. You're not in this in a team and go here and care about that part and report about this other part, and people react, because we don't need your little thoughts about topography. We're the experts, right? And the fact that there isn't that feedback loop that existed with Steve around is, again, in my opinion, a failure of structure by Tim Cook. I don't expect Tim Cook to have the taste, the style, the acumen, the vision, but I expect him to develop a management structure that allows that kind of feedback to exist.
To be fair, this thought process that you're going through right now is based on someone who left because they were unhappy.
Well, they left in 2014, and he left on happy terms. He just had a better opportunity. He didn't leave because he was kicked out. He left because someone gave him an incredible opportunity to do the next best thing at a company of his own. Why wouldn't you do that? So he didn't leave.
No, I'm not blaming him for leaving. That wasn't the issue. My point was that
he's not unhappy. He's just unhappy.
I would be more comfortable embracing what you just said as absolute truth if I heard a version from someone who thought things were okay. Does that make sense?
Well,
to be able to weigh in contrast and actually try to figure out exactly how close to the truth that particular description is.
It depends on what you mean by things are okay. I mean, he's super critical of the parts, in my opinion, that deserve to be critical, but he's also saying, like, look, the company's printing money. It's obviously doing quite okay. But so meaning you can like some parts of the company that are doing well, and you can point out this is bad, which gets to another point. The experience, like I may like actually I'm trying to think of a product that I like. Oh, hey, surprisingly, I like the fucking HomePod. It is an incredible conference phone thingy. And I used it today actually with Arvin. It was really interesting. We had a bad connection, and it was bad through FaceTime. There's a lot of static, but the HomePod killed the static. So I hear it. But it was also crapping out on some of our communications. And so I switched to my phone, and on the phone couldn't do the noise cancellation as well as the HomePod. And I heard it. And I'm like, oh, well, I got to call you back to make this. But it was killing like horrible static that I didn't even hear. Anyway, so while I may like some of their products, it doesn't mean that I like everything. Like they're valid criticisms that go into an Apple store now is like going to the DMV. It's a miserable thing. Wait forever.
Hold on, before we get to that though.
So
before we get to that,
okay.
I wanted to. There was one other thing that G brought up.
Yeah.
Said how much did Windows improvements play into this, or was it entirely Apple's own goal that doomed Mac to the nice to have niche market? We could all see where's the thing about Adobe. That was I wanted to get pissy about that. What caused pro developers like Adobe to move focus to Windows away from Mac? Did Apple's choice of x86 make it easier to write for Windows? First of all, fuck Adobe. And second of all, Adobe moved towards a Windows first development long before Apple switched to x86.
True.
If anything,
Adobe
gave
resents having to make Adobe. I'll go further. I believe Adobe resents having to make software for the Mac.
Yeah, and I mean, like the Mac made that company, and then they got pissed off about it, and it drove me nuts. I mean, this was like I could so be wrong about this, John. But I would see this happen at different companies back in the day when Apple was truly beleaguered and skirting the edge. You would see a company hire Windows people because they had to have all these Windows people to take care of their Windows machines, and then they had to have a CTO, and that CTO would be a Windows person, and then because they needed all these Windows people to take care of their Windows machines, and they didn't need anybody taking care of their Macs, or they needed fewer people taking care of their Macs, the Windows people would end up taking over. And it really felt like that was something that happened at Adobe. They brought people in to handle the port of or the move over from Mac to Windows, and then those people all seemed to hate the Mac. That's the way it felt like, at least on the outside.
Yeah, I think to me, it's two other factors that probably got them hating on the Mac. One, Steve Jobs basically pissed on the company and told them to go fuck themselves, as well as because their source code is like abortion smoothies is what they're.
Well, they went from Mac first to porting their Windows crap to Mac,
and their user interfaces are the most atrocious, and both on Microsoft, on Windows and on the Mac. If you use Acrobat, like I'm forced to. It's like sadists design this fucking user.
You can't use like PDF Pen Pro or one of the other third-party apps.
There's some government offices that totally misunderstood the whole of what a fucking PDF is. It's supposed to be universally accessible, and they put in Adobe only fucking features that force you to use their shit.
Right, I got it.
And so like it's beyond an Easter egg hunt to find where shit is. It's just the most fucking randomly designed goddamn interfaces ever. I hate them. That they're just shit incarnate with regard to their fucking philosophies on software. But Steve Jobs shit on them, which can't be pleasant to happen. And somewhat in their defense, they started to sell way more Windows software than Mac software. So you got to, go where you're being fed from. So I get that part, but nonetheless, fuck Adobe because fuck Adobe. Anyway, I don't know that the Adobe thing, again, going back to G's comments, is I think it was cross-platform. So to me, it's just, in my heart, the answer is Apple didn't give a fuck. That's really what caused it to basically lose a huge portion of the creative. And they still, to this day, do not give a fuck. The Mac Mini is retardedly overdue. The Mac Pro is. Their care for software has gone down the hole, and their UI has gone down the hole. It gets back to this theme, which is, I think, in a lot of ways, people, and I certainly perceive it this way, and a fair number of people, at least from the Twitter things I read, see the Mac as steadily going down, and see Windows as steadily getting better. Now, Grant, I point out that they're not exactly fair in their, because they talk about, well, this typography is wrong and this thing is here. This icon is in the wrong place and the UI is not as elegant as it could be, which I agree with. But then they totally are uncritical that the fact that Windows 10 still has fucking Windows 95 icon for the fucking preferences app and widgets all over the place that are like from Windows fucking 95 or earlier, and that hasn't been updated is a-okay. So there's a much more critical eye on Apple than there are on other things. But nonetheless, I think the general,
which makes sense, right? Because I mean, we have our higher expectations of Apple.
Well, but
I'm not saying it makes it right. I'm saying it makes sense.
It makes it totally understandable. Yes. I'm not sure it's a fair evaluation, but nonetheless, I do.
It's not fair at all. But it's like, yeah, it's understandable. It's like, oh yeah, I can see why you're wrong about that.
But I do think that the general thesis that a lot of people see, which is the Mac has been going downward and Windows has been going upward, is okay. It is a general trend, and if that continues long enough, there's an intersection. And for some people, that's happened, and for some pros, that has happened because they needed attention on pro equipment, and Apple shit on them long enough where that, working with Windows, the gap had closed. And then completely closed, and if anything, the highlands became on the Windows side. And for many other people, if it continues, those gaps will close in. And for me personally, I use this Surface Book I told you to do firmware updates and to prop up my MacBook right now. I did 90% of the duty of this fucking Surface is just updating itself. I have it do its security updates and whatnot. It bricked itself doing an update. I have 2 apps on here, and both of them are a printer app for a printer and a scanner app for my scanner. So nothing exotic, like no games, no weird utilities, just the most vanilla fucking apps ever, right? And it bricked the machine. I call up Microsoft and I'm like, hey, machine's bricked. What do you do? They're like, it was stuck in this reboot thing. It says, something went wrong on your machine. Let me try to fix it. Fixing, diagnosing. I can't fix it. Try again. And it would reboot and keep doing this forever. So I call them and they're like, well, that sucks. It's like, well, the solution is gotta wipe your machine. I'm like, and if I didn't do a backup, well, it's up to you. Figure that out. I'm like, all right, it's 2 apps. I can reinstall them. Fuck it. Let's wipe it. There's kind of a reboot partition in Windows 10 now, very similar to the Mac. It has a function to pave the machine. You hit pave the machine, it reinstalls the operating system, except it reinstalls with the settings app not there or accessible. The person on the phone's like, I don't know what to tell you. You're fucked. I'm like, okay, great. I'm like, why didn't you guys sell this fucking machine with a USB drive with an image that I could just set it back to factory? He's like, you're going to have to go to the store today. I go to the Microsoft store. No lie. I go into there, and the caliber of people that are employed there, by the way, incessantly, all they talk about is, I can't wait to leave. I can't wait till my shift is over. And I'm like, why are you actually bitching about this? You're otherwise gossiping all day and not doing a goddamn thing, and people are paying you for it. You shouldn't be shitting on your job too much, because frankly, if I were at the Apple store, I'd want to run the fuck away from there and work at the Microsoft store, because it's basically heaven. You don't have to do shit. They get the thumbstick to wipe my system clean from the thumb drive, right? From the official factory thing. They do it, they wipe it, they install it. they try to do the update and it fails. And I shit you not, this is their version of the genius saying, oh, that's totally normal.
Wow.
It's totally normal to have a factory fresh disk image install fail on a fucking update. Oh yeah.
So is part of your point here that
my
like
point
as pissy as we get?
My point is with regard to the gap. For me, the gap is still the fucking Grand Canyon. So even though, you know, Windows still is incrementally getting better and Apple is getting worse, the chasm to fill is so fucking vast that I'm like, are you kidding? When I got back, I was like licking my fucking Mac. Like, oh, I love you. I thought you were shit until this, but now you're like, you're fucking great. I love you. Because you don't know how great you have it until you know, you risk seeing what your other life can be like that. But I get it. For creative pros, they're like, fuck, I've got to render on, you know, like 80 goddamn processors. I can't wait for Apple to get its fucking thumbs out of its ass and do something reasonable here. And so for them, that chasm has been spanned. And for many others, you know, they're somewhere in between perhaps those extremes, but it's closing. And so, and the reason it's closing all boils down to me for a lack of care on Apple, lack of care in diligence and paying attention to things that they're still in theory paying attention to, and taking their fucking eye off the ball on things that they should not have taken their eyes off the ball. So that's the answer to OG.
That you're not going to get any argument out of me.
And
wait, here's the question though, John. Here's the question: are we headed back up?
I have not seen evidence of it yet. There's no.
Well, hold on. You have seen some evidence supporting that we could be. You haven't seen enough evidence to prove that it's the case. Would you agree with that?
So I guess this is an argument between two different pedanticists and what their definition of improvement is. For me, a definition of improvement includes a trend. For you, it may include just indicia. And it's a fair difference of opinion.
I think we're seeing a trend.
Yeah, I need to see 3 in a row.
Oh, before you can call it a trend. Okay, yeah, fair enough. I will accept that pedantry. Yeah, and I do too. I've seen evidence that could support the trend, but I need more evidence. I need more data proving that it is in fact a trend.
Yeah. And I don't know that it solves the issues that we brought up of Apple having broken the feedback loop that used to exist with Steve Jobs, which gets back to my criticism of Tim Cook. If that's true, and we don't know it is, it's just, one voice of many that are raising this issue. But to me, it seems very plausible by their actions. Tim Cook has got to improve. He's got to solve these structural management issues, or Apple will just turn into another company that made a fuck ton of money and nobody cares about.
Yeah, Microsoft, Steve Ballmer era Microsoft.
Yep. And this gets a little bit into, I guess, our second-ish issue, which kind of already touched on this, which is, has the Apple Store turned into the DMV? I kind of mentioned it a little bit. In some sense, going into the Microsoft Store, you know what the Microsoft Store is? It is a movie set for the Apple Store.
I saw you mention somewhere that like you walk in and you sort of expect to see like 2x4s propping up the back of it.
Yeah, so they got.
Is that correct? Am I quoting you right?
Roughly, yeah. There's all these accoutrements, and then these short, like they have the stairs that are very much like the Steve Jobs glass stairs, right? And the one side, they're posted in with the same kind of glass and steel posts, so it's all transparent. And then on the other side, they just shove it into drywall, and you're like, really? You did half of it, and then not the. I'm like, this is just kind of axiomatic of your company, you know. But even beyond that, the everyone there is an extra. They're not actually a technical person. They're just actors portraying a technical person. And their solution for everything is, well, we'll just wipe your drive with this here thumbstick, and then when the
but I mean that's been the solution in Windows forever. I mean that's not. I don't know if you can actually just blame that on the current employees at the Microsoft Store.
Well, to be fair, the quality of all Apple employees at the stores have gone to shit. I would say the vast majority of Apple employees that you encounter on the phone when you call up and in the store these days is someone that I call a script kiddie, meaning they read a script, they go whatever. There's no comprehension going on there, and it's hard to blame Apple in this case because they're a victim of their own success. There's only so many really cool with it people that have that tech ability that you're going to find and be able to hire that cheaply, right? There's a limited pool, and once you've saturated that pool and sopped it up, what you got left over are people that can read scripts.
I would argue that Apple makes enough money that then they should therefore increase the salaries so they can actually get the kind of talent that we want them to have. Now, I have something else to say though. Here in Silicon Valley, like my preferred Apple store is Valley Fair. It's I don't know, maybe 3-4 miles away from me at the most, and it is about 5 miles away from Apple. That store has great employees, take care of me. The store is busy, it's packed. The Genius Bar is good. The people managing the traffic are good. The staff that is designed to take care of you for sales is good. It is a well-oiled machine here. And furthermore, I'll add that directly across the mall aisle from that particular Apple store is a Microsoft store. And if the Apple store has in it 200 people, the Microsoft store will have like 4 to 10 people and then 6 to 12 employees. It's this embarrassing comparison. I can't believe, anyway, whatever. I don't think that your criticisms of Apple Store employees is universal, at least compared to what I deal with here.
It may not be universal, but unfortunately, it's more than indicative, because I'm talking about the Fifth Avenue store is a total disaster shit show. It's appalling. I can't tell you the number of people in Dallas as well that they go in, and I told them, don't go to the Apple store, don't go to a Genius, they will destroy your phone. And they didn't get it back up, and then they didn't listen to me, and then there were fucking tears because of what an Apple employee did and wiped shit out. The quality has gone down greatly, plus the waiting that goes on. And the worst thing about the Fifth Avenue store, and it's no different, by the way, the one on the west side by Lincoln Center.
The Soho store?
The Lincoln Center store is a shit show too. They're overpacked. And internationally, they're overpacked. So this is the face of Apple internationally. I guarantee you, many people from many countries are going in there, and they're seeing bedlam in this place. It's just a fucking disaster. You end up waiting an hour overtime, whatever, because they can't manage it. And I don't think Angela's doing a good job in this regard. Like, this is fuck the trees in the place. You need to manage flow. And that store has huge flow problems, not to mention quality of personnel problems as well. So it's pretty dire in that store, and it has been for a while.
Do you think does Apple need to pay more money?
Well, so this is an interesting question you raise, and I'm not sure if money solves this. Meaning, if you get even triple the salary, right, for real expertise, will you get triple? Or will you get enough people still? It may be a question of there's only X amount of this, and maybe Apple is getting, X minus 10% of all those people anyway, paying the current salaries. Mm-hmm. So does it make sense to spend 2X to get an extra 10%? Because you're still going to have the problem that you still have to pay script kiddies to fill in the rest of the blanks because they're so overwhelmed. I don't know the answer to that economically. So to answer you, maybe, but the beyond dealing with people that don't know shit and funnel, it's coming up with a structure to funnel that better. And it's definitely coming up like, look, this is not a dentist or DMV appointment where you should be waiting 2 fucking hours past your appointment date on getting it. Like, you guys gotta clearly get to reality, realize the 15-minute slot that you thought is really a 40-minute slot and
Right.
schedule appropriately, because it's a disaster in there just from that vantage. And if you have a store that's that overcrowded, what that tells you is you need either a way bigger store or another store nearby to offset some of this, because it's a disaster. And it's not just the Fifth Avenue store, which I could say is somewhat exceptional because it's the fucking Fifth Avenue store, but it's also many of the other stores in Manhattan. It's bedlam there. Oftentimes just fucking
Fair enough.
And I'm like, I got to get out of here.
Have you considered coming here and going to the Apple Park store? Because guess what? This is going to surprise you. That store is a dream come true. Are you surprised?
I'm not surprised. And that's,
by the way, Apple Maps has been pretty good here in Silicon Valley the whole time too. Are you surprised?
And Apple Maps actually has improved all over time. You know, this is a market.
But it was always pretty good here.
Okay.
And
sure.
And it's because you know, it's like, it's because this is where everybody is. And of course, you know, the Apple store and the Apple Park is obviously going to be staffed by probably, you know, some of their very best retail people.
Well, it's excellent that it's not universal, but the question is, has it gotten bad enough that the perception is now changing? Look, iTunes was once a glass of water in hell, right? It was such a good product that's fairly the way people viewed it. Like when they got it on Windows, it was just awesome. Yep. Now it is hell itself.
Yep.
That should be a warning flag that it used to be you wanted to go to the Apple store because it was so pleasant and nice. It was just nice to be there. Now it's become hell. Apple needs to work fast before this becomes stuck to it and universally decreed to be a shit show, kind of like Maps is unfairly now, in my opinion. But it is what it is. The perception stuck. You don't want this perception to stick with Apple stores. Like they need to address this shit, and now, which means they need to time manage the flow there better. They need to expand the places that are most hellish to give them more space, and or build another fucking store next door or something like that. Because it's the perception is mounting.
Yep. Fair enough.
All right. So we killed those two topics. What was our third topic? I don't know if we're going to get a lot of time into it because it was, we actually tackled it. We talked about the Scott Forstall already. So, you know,
yeah, kind of, yeah.
Jony hate Forstall. So we knocked that out. We actually got all through them. So I guess it's, do you have anything else before we go to show picks?
No, I don't. How about you?
Nope, I'm good. So my show picks is a little bit of a rant.
Okay.
There's a asswipe on Forbes that made this clickbaity video about what a disaster USB-C cables are because they have different speeds. They only support some power on some cables and not on others. And they go through this whole thing very, some of which is true, but they managed to miss one little thing, which is the USB-C God cable from Apple. Apple sells a cable. It's like, I think it's 0.8 meters long. It's $39, so it's not cheap, but it does everything. It carries video. It carries full 40 gig file, throughput transfer. It does 100 watts of power on charging. So if you want to not be confused, you could buy the Apple USB-C God cable and not have to worry because it is capable of the full might of all USB-C-ness, including.
So is this a rant about a bad column or a tip for solving a problem?
The tip is I will link to the show notes, and here maybe I will I will link in the show notes to the Apple USB-C God cable, which is the one cable to rule them all. And if you have any USB-C problems, you just click to that. It looks like every other USB-C cable, but it is, like I said, full 40 gigabit. And another tip, by the way, I noticed I was having some problems with both my TiVo and some other things. And what it turned out to be is I've been using Cat 5e cables for just between my cable modem and whatnot. They burn out after enough time, even though they won't report it. Well, it's a cable, so it's not reporting shit, but you'll just have weirdness. and it's dirt cheap to get some Cat 7 cables and replace them. I replaced all of them, plus they're now pretty color coded. And I'll give a show link to that too. But if you've ever if you start having weirdness with your TiVo, like the tuning adapter was acting up with it, with what was going on, and it could literally be, and this is a thing, Cat cables, especially when you push them at the upper limits of what they're capable of, will burn out after time. And so buying a higher level Cat cable now is dirt cheap. So check those out too. So I'll have those in the show link, the show notes. For the God USB-C cable, there is one cable to rule them all. You just get this. You never worry about whether it's compatible. It will do everything. And I'll link to the cheap Cat 7 cables that I bought as well.
All right, makes sense.
You got a show pick?
I do. It's an app called Declutter. And I'm trying to get to the preferences. I can't actually see them behind my camera. It's an app called Declutter. So all it does is grab files on your desktop and put them into folders for you on a regular basis.
Potentially dangerous.
Yeah, I suppose. I mean, it's actually, though, let me get this correct. So they're smart folders for images, and I can't find my preferences. Images and this is ridiculous. Images, files, music. Is this correct? So it's 4 different kinds of files, and I'm like, I didn't do my homework here to be able to properly describe it.
Like
but it's
Word documents or something.
Say again.
Maybe like PDF or Word documents or something.
I'm not sure yet if you can. I haven't delved into exactly how much you can set up, but like one of my big things is I take a lot of screenshots for work for TMO. I'm taking a lot of screenshots all the time, and what I love is that once an hour, basically, Declutter comes and it grabs all my screenshots and it puts them in my pictures folder. And could I do this myself? Yes. Do I end up not doing it? No. But it makes it a lot easier for me to find all the crap that I dump onto my desktop and be able to sort through it, get rid of it, and put it where it goes and whatnot. And it keeps my desktop much neater, much cleaner. I really like this app. It's $9.99 for it's a Mac app for $9.99, and it's by George Sargunaraj C.
Okay. I'm super OCD. Like my desktop must have no files on it ever.
Yeah, well, see, but I want my desktop like that, John, and I find it very, very difficult. And I find it very, very difficult to actually maintain that. And then I will eventually have my desktop just covered with crap, just covered just with icons of crap. And I like that my files are being automatically swept and put into places where it actually makes sense for them to go, where I can more easily manage everything and take care of it. And so anyway, I very much enjoyed this app. I've been running it for a couple of weeks now. I like it.
Excellent tip. One pro tip for you, like I do a lot of screen grabs all the time just to communicate with you. It's easier to say, hey, look at this. And it's so bad now that the key combo that I use is so hardwired into my head that even now that I have like on the touch bar a single key version of it, I can't stop doing the key combo of it, which
sure
shows you how strong muscle memory can be. It's Command Control Shift 4. And what that does is it lets you grab any portion of the screen for a screen grab, and you could still tap the space bar to toggle it from a selection marquee to just grabbing an entire window, right?
Yep.
Engage it. But what it does is it takes the screenshot, but only to the clipboard. So you don't have
yeah, sure. Here, yeah, that is useful for a lot of things. Well, I mean, but for me, there's sometimes when I know that I'm going to want to keep the screenshot, and then other times when I just need to grab it so I can paste it. So I need to actually put that into my head for sure.
Yeah.
Anyway, it's called Declutter. We can put the link in the show notes. I have very, very much found it a useful utility in the 2 weeks I've been running it. I'm going to write about it at TMO probably this next week.
Cool, man. Well, I think we bludgeoned a lot of horses today. You got anything else?
I don't, man. Good to see him.
Good seeing you, and it's good having all our guests along. Ancient Alien, thank you for joining us, and thank all of you viewers, all 3 of you, for joining us. And on those popular topics, we will see you, I hope, next week.